essentially that presentation was about using wind power and wind. Just real quick until somebody can shut me up if they got something else to talk about. Wind was always designed separately from solar so that when the wind power systems were measuring how much power was in your battery, and when your battery was full, what they did is they had a shunt that would close a relay and send that excess power to just uh, resistor, basically, to burn off the excess power that the wind generator was producing just to get rid of it, which is sort of silly. And early in a couple of years ago, when we were talking about it, we thought, well, why not run it through an MPPT charge controller, just like every other solar system that's measuring incoming voltage, measuring what the battery needs, and controlling it that way, as opposed to just burning it off as heat. But and I honestly haven't done that yet. I'm doing that now at my laboratory ranch in the Mojave Desert to see whether or not that works because
Are you
it
doing it? Are you heating water with it? Because I know a number of RVers do that sort of thing instead of just putting it
yeah,
in
that's
a
what I
resistor.
was doing instead of just putting it into a resistor which
Hmm.
created heat and burned off the power. I was running it through one of those electric water heater elements and heating water. I took a 20-pound barbecue propane bottle and torched a hole in it and welded in the thing and made a water heater for that experiment, which worked great. So we're both charging batteries and heating water, and that worked, but it was a little cumbersome. But I may go back to doing that again now as a part of our camp shower because we want to continually heat water in the water heater, either from solar through the battery or from wind also through the battery. But that's a means of burning off that excess electricity because it's generating all the time. So feel free to go through that presentation, but it is outdated from the idea that we want to change the way that we're dealing with the power that it produces. Um, but it's a certainly a viable way to create renewable power on playa. We always seem to have wind of some sort, whether a lot or just a small breeze. But every extra thing we can grab is useful, particularly at night when solar is shut off. So, so wind is one of our subjects.
I'd love to hear more from anybody that else that has experience doing wind. I did run into a camp that had a really big solar array, and it was the only other wind system I saw in Playa. I was trying to find some pictures of it. It reminds me that I'll have to look for this because they had a really nice setup. But with the challenges with wind, as you mentioned, Steve, that you have to have it high enough so that you don't kill someone with it. And the other problem is since it's moving, you have to have it tied down. This system that I saw was on the frontage of one of the camps, and they had it took up a lot of space with guy wires that were going every which direction to keep it high enough so that it would get enough air or enough wind going through it, but also that it had to stay out of the harm's way. But the other question was, if there is a really strong windstorm, is it going to you know uh, you know fall over and hit somebody? So I think that's one of the challenges with wind. Plus, it's also variable. I mean, look at how many days we've seen where there were hardly any wind, and then there's other days when it was extremely windy. So the intermittent nature of it it could be useful for, as you mentioned, even at night, if there is wind at night, to fill in when you're not charging from the sun. Uh,
Yeah.
uh, Bunny Camp raised their hand. Do you want to comment?
Well, I was wondering, so for all the energy topics, I guess specifically, what is if we have like a generator that we use fuel for, what would be like the next step to make that more green? Like what would be the first step in making our camp more, you know, energy efficient?
Um, I'd say the first step is figure out how you can use less energy.
Okay.
You know, so we always talk about how, you know, you want to calculate your loads to see how much power you need, and then you figure out how to use less power. And I mean, it sounds like a flippant answer, and it's not. We don't mean it that way because, in fact, maybe this would be a good time for me to show a couple of pictures. I always think in terms of pictures. Let me show a couple of slides
Yeah,
because
and while you're doing that, I was going to say one of the things, if you're transitioning, you will at some point have batteries, and a battery
right,
bank might be a place to
right.
begin because you can then build a hybrid system. You can charge your batteries through your generator when it's turned on, and then if you have batteries at whatever voltage and an inverter if you need 120-volt power, you can then shut off your generator and run the battery bank to power whatever you want to power, say at night or in at other times. And so you could start transition by doing a hybrid system. So
And
One of
that's an excellent point. It's like basically just, in fact, we Rat has a video on our website that Bruce Cooper did where he showed using a generator to charge his Bluetti portable battery system.
One of the things that I think isn't obvious to people that are starting in solar is that when they think about generators, they think, well, they think in terms of your house, right? That, hey, I plug something in and I get juice out of it and the stuff runs, and that whatever's behind the wall kind of doesn't matter. It's all magic. And with a generator, you can think of it the same way, but unfortunately, it's poor in that if it's a 4,000-watt generator and you're only powering something very small, you're literally wasting a whole bunch of efficiency by the fact that that thing can produce 4,000 watts, but isn't, and yet is still running. And so one of the magical hybrid things to do is that while the solar can charge your battery bank during the day, your generator, rather than running to produce AC, which is kind of what you would buy it for normally. Instead, it charges your batteries very quickly at its highest output, at its most efficient output. And then you shut it off and you got battery power to do all your other stuff. And that's not an obvious thing, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say the first thing I would do is actually accurately calculate your power need before you get a generator. In my job with DPW Fuel, I'm looking at all the generators, that not all of them, a quarter of them. There's 4 of us that cover the city. For those of you that are getting fuel from us, I often see larger generators that are producing way more power than the camp actually needs. And if I remember earlier today, and I think it was under the greenthemecampcommunity.org, they have a link to a way to figure out to assess what your power needs are, so you can calculate. Because that can be a bit daunting if you don't know how to do that. I have not looked at that link, so I don't know, but I did notice it and thought, yeah, that's a good idea. But I would start with that, and then absolutely, as I said in the blast thing earlier today, definitely start looking towards batteries associated with the generator if you can't jump to solar. And actually, if you can jump to solar, you can put a battery on your solar.
Well, even then, you still need to measure because you have to make sure you.
No, absolutely, yeah. So
right.
knowing what you need is the first thing, and then working off from that.
Let me just show an example of this. Can you see this? I can go full screen with this. Is this showing up my screen here? Yeah, so this is an example I put together from a few years ago when I was trying to run a little window air conditioner. This was the example I mentioned at the session this morning, where my first experiment on playa-wide solar was I used a battery from one of the modules from a wrecked Tesla, and I built a small system, and my goal was to have air conditioning and microwave bacon, and it was, the idea was, that's kind of flippant, okay, but the idea was air conditioning. I knew I wouldn't be able to power the air conditioner that was on the roof of my RV because it was too big. I mean, I could have if I'd have built a big enough system, but I wasn't interested in building one that big to begin with. And so I just bought a window air conditioner at Home Depot for $130 or whatever, and I stuck it in the window. And then the idea of so that runs more continuously, kind of on and off, as opposed to a microwave, which was 1,300 watts, but only for maybe 2 minutes. Anyway, so this was a great example, though. This was the rated specification. You can look at the number plate on an appliance. In this case, this window air conditioner is rated at 7.3 amps. You say, okay, so if I took all of the devices that I need in my camp and I add up the number plates, it's going to be a large number. And then when I said, well, then figure out how much, less that you can use, this is a great example. So I actually measured, this is the air conditioner running just with the fan on, and it's taking only 0.8 of an amp. And then the picture to the right is it running at steady state with the compressor on, and it's only drawing 4.4 amps. It's not drawing 7.3 amps. So from a continuous standpoint, it's drawing far less than the rated the number on the nameplate. However, I also measured with separately. I was able to measure it was 9.6 amp as an instantaneous starting current, and this is where you'll also see people do things like with their RVs. They call them soft starting devices, and it's basically a way to reduce that inrush current. Because if you have, whether it's a generator or whether it's an inverter from a battery system, you have to not only account for what's the power rating for running continuously, but what's that instantaneous current look like. And there's a lot of, you could end up having either a generator or an inverter that could handle the steady state fine, but it can't handle the instantaneous starting current. So this is a great example why it's really important to measure what you're actually going to use, as opposed to just going by like, how do you figure out how much do you need? Its starting point is looking at the number of plates, but really it's looking at doing some real measurements is important. One of the other things is I noted the difference between generators and solar battery systems on Playa is that we've seen this frequently where people will test their generator at home, like they'll test it in their RV generator, and it works fine in their driveway. And then when they get to Playa, it won't start the air conditioner. And in some cases, what happens is, because we're at 3,800 feet on elevation on Playa, you actually have less power output from the gasoline or diesel engine, and so typically gasoline at the smaller end. And where it worked fine at maybe at sea level, it doesn't actually work fine at 3,800 feet. And then also additional heat and so forth. So there's that, when you're at the edge of that with that instantaneous starting current, that can be a problem. I also put a couple of other things related to measuring. It's like, how do you measure? And one of the things that I've been trying to teach people is like, how do you measure this stuff? And the one way that, the really easy way on the right is like one of these plug-in power meters you can buy. I have a QR code that you can go it just takes you to Amazon, but I'm not pitching any particular brand here. It's just examples. And you can buy these 120 volt meters really inexpensively, anywhere $10 to $30 or so, depending on the model, and they'll show you how much power it's drawing, the voltage and the current, and you can run. I've even run this at home. I have one I put on my refrigerator at home just to get a more realistic view of what does my refrigerator take on a regular basis over time, not just instantaneously. But then, how do you measure lower voltages? On the far left is very typical USB. If you want to plug in, what does it take to charge your phone? What does it take to run? I mean, there's lots of lights that you can run on USB. It's very common, but either USB A or USB C. That again, $10 to $30 or more. But these little meters that plug in can be really a useful way of estimating how much power you actually need for any particular thing. And then there's also typical 12 volt or a little higher, sometimes 24 volt loads for things you'd plug in a cigarette lighter or other small battery or something like that. Again, you can buy these meters for $10 or $20 at most, and you just plug them in, and it gives you an idea not only the voltage and current, but in watts. It'll show you, even if you run it over time, many of them will actually do cumulative power over time. So it's a really easy way of getting a handle on realistically how much power are you actually consuming. And one other thing is, I should have started with step one, which is the safety aspect. I find these non-contact voltage testers extremely valuable in, they're not 100% perfect. They can give you false negatives or positives at times. So they're not perfect, but they're really useful though for tracing out, like if you have electrical grid or if you have power, you're trying to figure out if something is actually on, you just touch this, you turn it on, you just touch it up against the cable and you can see if it's live or not. Some of them will even go down to low voltage, like 12 volts. Not all of them will. And then the other is I found really useful. Again, I'm not advertising any particular brand here, but these sorts of plug-in outlet testers, I've had them ones that are in the past that just have kind of idiot lights. Just have a couple lights that show you if the outlet is wired properly, which is extremely useful too, because you never know on playa how something is wired. But some of the newer ones actually have voltmeters, which are extremely useful also on playa, because you never know whether your generator or your battery system is not putting out the correct amount of voltage. It's great for debugging, or if it's just, sometimes if you just you need to figure out, am I drawing too much power on a particular line? So that can be really useful. Again, these things are on the order of $20 or less each. And then you can also get clamp-on power meters, which can be useful as well. So anyway, just thought I'd mention that. This is part of documentation we have as part of the Renewables for Artists team, which is a lot of it is linked from the Green Theme Camp. And I think, Ms. Claire, I think on the Green Theme Camp website, I think it actually points to our power calculator that's actually on the Renewables for Artists team. We work pretty closely together. So
Yeah, that whole calculating your load thing is, while there's a spreadsheet to do it, even the spreadsheet can feel a little daunting if
Right.
not being given some kind of hand holding through it, if you're not already electrically inclined. But there is on Hive, and I think maybe on our YouTube link as well for RAT, is a skill sharpening workshop on literally going through how that works. And so walking through just a couple of examples is super helpful and enables you to really do that and really extrapolate that for the rest of it. Because for the most part, it's kind of like, what 12 volt things do I have and how do I do that? And what 120 volt AC kind of stuff do I have and what's that take? And if you put those in those two different tables, it kind of starts falling out the bottom what it is that you need in terms of solar and battery and all that kind of stuff.
Right. The calculator that we have was created by Doug Hansen in the RAT team, and it's very detailed. It's great, but it's also sometimes daunting to get started. So we have some presentations on kind of the more gentle introduction to those things. I know that was probably a long-winded answer to your question, but I hope that was. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, certainly go ahead.
If people still want to keep talking about energy, we can, but if not, I had a quick question about the composting camp.
Yeah, is Claire here? Claire is here.
I just wanted to do a quick rundown of like how it works for like other camps I'm working with the composting camp.
I'm not sure if Claire is here at the moment. Sorry, we don't have that. I don't know, but contact her or contact that team. Other questions?
Airport.
Pardon me? Is there a question? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. So something that may help with sustainability measurements is I discovered that Black Rock Airport publishes their wind and temperature measurements during the burn up through about September 2nd. And that chart is really handy just to kind of start to see, well, is wind worth it? Would it have been worth it? You can see the hours that wind was measured, what time of day or night. So I just put a link into the under the chat if anybody wants to pull that up. That link will show the early September measurements during the windstorms we were all pulling out last year.
Yeah, and as Dr. Steve had mentioned earlier with regards to the wind stuff, I think he posted a link as well. The when I started looking at, hey, I wonder if wind is the next thing that I want to kind of get into or bring into my energy stuff for the burn. The tricky part that wasn't so obvious is that in the case of solar, the sun's out and the solar panel gets saturated and it gives out whatever it gives out, 20 volts and so many amps, and that's it. And so your controller has to deal with that, and all that stuff's kind of getting really plug and play these days, and especially with solar generators. But in the case of wind, as the wind picks up, you're getting more and more voltage and more amps. And at some point, you got to do something with that. And if your equipment isn't rated for it, it'll smoke your equipment, right? So there has to be a mechanism on a wind system to shunt extra power to make that power go away, right? And that's kind of what Steve was talking about, that you can do that with a giant resistor that just basically turns energy into heat. It's a conversion of energy, right? But also that if done well, you can turn that into hot water, right? And now you got something useful out of it. But none of that's quite as plug and play as you'd want it to be.
Yeah, that's why we haven't hit wind yet, but we're super interested. We went big with solar for a camp our size. No regrets. We would do it the same way if we need it. Actually, we're doubling our solar panels for 2025. But I don't want to misfire on wind because it's, the solar was expensive, but I see it over the period of a decade, very worthwhile investment. But I could see where wind could be misapplied if we don't do it right.
How big is your camp?
We're only 16, 18 people.
And what's the scale of your solar power system that you're saying you have now and that you're doubling
We
it?
were bringing in so last year was 3,000 watts worth of panels. This year will be 6K. 6K actually inbound capacity. Last year I did the math wrong. We had twice as much battery as necessary. I spent a lot on batteries.
Well,
Underestimated the amount of, I know we all do, underestimated the amount of panels needed. Learned some hard lessons about solar math. And something that I really wanted to do before this symposium, but one of our goals for next year, I want to put together a slide deck and presentation of mistakes that we made, things we did right, all these things, because we banged into things.
Oh, we'd love to see that.
Some of the online,
yes.
We used online resources from you and other teams that have the experience. We're a relatively new team. My first time on Playa was 2019. We spun off from a camp, formed a new camp in 2024. Solar was awesome. We don't allow generators. It was definitely the way to go. And I mean, you can see behind us we were really, we were very activated. We did a lot with electricity. We had 4 65-inch flat panels that we were running much of the time, about 500 to 2,000 watt sound system some evenings, and no generator for backup. But we ended up having to lean on, we got lucky. One of our next door neighbors had an excess of solar power and they saved our butts. They let us use some of their solar that they were going to use to run their air conditioners. And instead they made sure our camp kept running. We're really indebted to them.
That's awesome.
It's the kind of thing we see at Black Rock City. And we'd love to reciprocate for somebody else in the future. But, I don't want to be too long-winded about this, but solar was an amazing experience for us. And we would love to share what we learned. And most importantly, share the mistakes that we made, and do it in a concise way because we're all busy. But I kind of want to do the same thing with wind. But having seen what it took to do solar, which is much more straightforward, there's still a lot of things you could do wrong with solar. And so I know the wind is going to be a greater challenge.
Oh, that's great. I mean, we'd love to see what your experience is because it's exactly like we're all, fumbling through this learning ourselves. I mean, there's the math and then there's the reality on Playa, and sometimes those don't meet, but it's, we'd love to see what your experience was. Absolutely. I would love to have you put that together.
Yeah. And, we're all using hardware that's not tested on the Playa.
Right. I was just having a discussion this past week with the vendor. We were talking about that this one vendor was really looking forward to coming to Playa this year, literally to test their stuff. They said, "Oh, we want to come to Playa because it's it's like military grade kinds of testing." But on the other hand, I talked with another vendor. I think it was last year we were talking with a vendor, and they said, they didn't really see the value of bringing their equipment to Playa. I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, it is like, it is such an incredible testing environment because if it can survive there, it'll survive just about anywhere. So it's a matter of perspective, but it's the brutal environment is great.
We went Victron for most of our electronics because I just, the analogy of something out in salt water on the open ocean can't fail. So I thought that was the closest to what we would, and it's been reliable.
Valkyrie was asking if the vendors want to donate equipment for testing purposes. That's literally this one vendor that I spoke with last year. They wanted to. They were like really hip on providing equipment for artists for the Renewables for Artists team supports, donating some of the use of it. And then they said, well, we want to do a big advertising campaign. And we said, that's not really what we're about, but you'll get invaluable testing experience. And they're like, yeah, no thanks. I'm like, as a product manager myself, I understand the value of endurance testing, and you're not going to find a better environment. I mean, like literally, I used to joke that if you come to Burning Man, don't expect it to be the 4 seasons. It's 1 season. It's hell, but it's now we have the 4 seasons. You really have everything, right? I mean, we have the heat and we have the sun, and now we've had rain. And then this past year, when we were building the temple, it was freezing cold. Maybe not quite freezing, but it was very cold, but much different than we were expecting it to be. So you just never know what it's going to be. So, yeah. Anyway, I'll get off my high horse about that, but I think we'd love to hear what your experience is. Speaking of wind, while we were talking before, I actually went through my phone. I just found some pictures of this camp that I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of the camp, but let me try to see if I can play this video that I recorded of their wind system, which was, hang on, let me see if this will work. If this will work here. Can you see this? Is QuickTime showing this?
Not yet. It's black.
It's black. Okay, so it's
black.
not. I wonder why it's not. Okay, let me try one more thing.
Just don't reboot the meeting, Ken.
No, I won't. I won't do that. Let me optimize for video sharing and see if that. I'll turn off sound because we don't care about sound. Let me see if this works.
I see video.
Do you see it now?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
So you can see this complicated. I mean, it was a very lightweight power wind system, and this was like, so Dr. Seed was talking about how he has a vertical one that has more blades, and this one, and I think more blades helps it get started quicker, but it's noisier. This was actually a fairly simple one. I mean, you look at the detail of the three blades and a small motor up front, or a top generator up on top, but there's a lot of guy wires. Now, hang on, let me stop this and see if I can show you the pictures that I have here. Oh yeah, this might work. So this is a close-up of what the generator looked like. But you can see all these guy wires, and then and that's the video. Let me close that. And let me just try to share a couple of other pictures. So they had a large. I don't know where it went. I have too many windows open on my computer, I think. I don't know what you were seeing. Sorry. Hang on 1 second. Oh, here we go. This was a combination of solar and here we go. They had a pretty large solar farm in front of their camp, which was pretty impressive. They pulled this out, but it's also a great example of a small amount of hardware that was very effective. I don't know if how they anchored these panels down. I don't know how it would handle if the wind caught in under there, but it was a really large solar array. And then one more picture I'll show you of their system.
I have purchased.
Pardon me?
I have purchased that type of bracket. They're quite inexpensive on Amazon.
Oh, they are. Okay.
Yeah, that aluminum base, it's actually quite inexpensive. They're about 50, 60 bucks each
Oh,
for a
okay.
large panel.
Okay. So they built a trailer that had these two huge rack battery systems and a lot of Victron components. It was an example of an immaculately done system, very, very professionally done. This is not your typical consumer grade sort of system, but they powered it was a very large camp that they were powering. So you can see the kind of the scale of what they're doing. And I'm really sorry I don't know the name of the camp. I don't have the notes handy, but it was pretty impressive. So it was a combination of solar and wind. And I don't know how much of the wind actually provided. I want to get back in touch with that group. That was really pretty cool.
Retro Frolic has been around for 15 years, and they've been doing wind for about 7 or 8. So we're planning on going and seeing their hardware this year.
That'll be cool. We'd love to have you join one of our ramp meetings, or you can join the team if you want. But if you want to come, we meet Wednesdays at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time. If you'd be willing to come and tell us about about what you guys built.
Yes, absolutely. We're glad to share.
What else? What other topics people want to talk about? I have a question for you, though. What did you do about refrigeration? So Dr. Steve showed how he used chest freezers with solar power. What did you do for refrigeration in your camp?
So I own a Freightliner Class 6 truck, and so we actually hauled down a used 36-inch LG household fridge freezer. I bought a used one that was relatively new because of the power consumption, and then also bought a brand new Costco sourced Samsung 24-inch wide column freezer, full height, like a 5-foot tall column freezer. It was awesome. I mean, we had ice cream and everything. And the thing that I was stunned is, like one of your things you just showed, the actual power consumption was not bad. I mean, that
Right.
fridge typically was turning in at like 40, 50 watts. We had ice cubes, an ice maker. It could walk up to it. It was crazy.
I think
And
this is the thing that we need to get more, have more experience sharing with the community, is exactly your experience and what Dr.
people were
Steve
like,
is
"You have
doing.
a fridge?"
Right.
And it was actually, the fridge did not load up our system at all relative to what really almost killed us was the 4 65-inch flat panels. I didn't realize quite how much power those burn, but we need them for what we're doing with interactivity. And that's why I just doubled our panels, because
Oh, you had
we really
65-inch TVs or
4 of
monitors.
them.
Wow.
4 of them. In fact, you can see one behind us in this,
Oh,
in
right.
this screenshot.
Uh-huh.
We had 4 of those, and a sound system. And we did not want to compromise on that. So we've doubled our panels for 2025. Otherwise we'd have to give up. The thing we would have had to give up is the televisions, the panels.
Okay,
Different
so
term, flat panels, not solar.
You just mentioned a great topic that I wanted to also cover, which was sound. So a lot of people have said, think that sound, you can't do sound. Well, probably if you're doing something on the order of magnitude of like Mayan Warrior, that might be difficult because they're pumping an enormous amount of bass to a huge audience. But for a camp, sound, actually, this is another thing that Doug Hansen did a video about for the RAT team about using Class D amplifiers and how it doesn't necessarily consume as much power as you think it's going to consume. But how did the sound consume power versus your TVs?
What were it peak about 600? So the system we had could have theoretically peaked at 2000, I guess, if we were doing hearing damage, but we had we were typically, I think, measuring about 400 to 600 watts for the whole camp for sound.
Got
We
it.
had four. So what I did is I went to Costco and bought four of those cheap Ion brand standalone speakers. They're like the monitors the bands use.
Right.
They're like 2 foot tall speakers on tripods. Bought four of those, ran it off an iPad, and that was it. It was all self-contained, nothing exotic. And I just hooked those four speakers pointing inward, bike locked them to the corner to each corner post, and that was it. We had our sound system.
That's
And
terrific.
that really was not an issue with our power consumption. It was I should call them televisions, because when I say panels, that's confusing in a solar context. But it was our four TV 65-inch displays that was the issue.
Mhm.
Everything else we had were fine. The other thing is we know we'll probably never run actual air conditioning. We have a good shade structure design, and we just don't think it's necessary.
Mhm. Mhm. Miss
I don't
Claire?
drink, but I'll like drink more beer if you're too hot.
Miss Claire, you had your hand up?
Yeah. Couple of things. I think finding examples, and I mean that's a fantastic setup, and solar punks and all the rest, snow cone solar, that's great. But when I go around camps and I talk, as Hotspot was saying, our fuel department is actually there to try and reduce the amount of fuel.
Right.
Sounds weird, but that's why we're there. So I go around and I talk to camp leads, and I'm talking to them about solar, and one of the things is they're intimidated by the whole thing. We've already talked about that, but also they see these big examples and they think it's beyond their abilities. The fact is it's not, but it's beyond what they need. So finding examples of smaller, more manageable is great. And one of the ones I like to use is, and don't ask me how much solar power we're producing in the camp that I'm also a lead of, because we're a bunch of veteran burners that basically camp together, and we do have a lot of solar, which gives us light primarily at night, and then everyone else is running little solar battery lights and stuff for themselves. But the one thing that we share and blows everyone's mind is we have an ice maker. And it's really small, and no one is allowed to fill coolers, because you couldn't anyway, it doesn't produce enough, but it's enough that at the end of the day, at cocktail hour, everybody in our camp, and there's about 20 of us, can have an iced drink. And that example impresses a lot of small camps. So it's finding things like that we can get out to the community as an example. And then it's a jump off, right? I mean, you can then build on that. The other thing that I hear from camp leads is, well, if we put money into this, we only use it for a week every year. And what are we going to do with it the rest of the year, assuming you can find somewhere to store it? And that is another thing that I think that we have to help people with, to encourage them to use solar, is to come up with ways they can integrate panels into what they do in the default world. And that's going to become easier and easier, I would like to think, as time progresses. But I can tell you, we're in the process of trying to design one. One of our main camp people is building a metal shop right now, fabrication shop, just outside Reno. And one of the things, he's going to have a lot of solar. And one of the things that we're going to do as part of that is build a trailer that has panels on it that we can bring to Playa. Fortunately, we don't have to bring it very far from Reno. Use it for the camp as a general power source, and then he can plug it into his metal shop and augment the solar that he's already going to be running. So so it's not, we've got to find the small ways in to get people to adopt it.
There's on the Green Theme Camp website, there's a link under the power section to see if I can show you just this briefly. It's this presentation again by Doug Hansen. This is a picture I took of him when he was setting up his camp. This is a perfect example of a small camp. It was 4 people. You see the small solar panels. He built a small solar power system. He talks about it in the video of his camp. But I mean, a small solar system from scratch for his camp. But this is also the kind of thing you can just buy off the shelf at on Amazon. It's small, but it's the kind of thing that it powered 4 people They had a little 12 volt, I think, fridge. They charged those little. They had electric bikes. They recharged, flashlights, and they powered lighting. It's very possible. Plus, what do you do with it the rest of the year? Well, depends on what you do with your life. If you go camping the rest of the year, this is very convenient. But if you live in many areas of the world now, you want to have an emergency backup system. So this is a great emergency backup system. And it used to be, we'd say this for those of us in California where PG&E likes to turn off the power all the time or burn the area down. Unfortunately, we're seeing this in the rest of the country and the rest of the world as well. So these systems are not only they're cost effective because they're small and they're usable in other situations. And it's not like you're having to buy 30 panels and bring a trailer load full of stuff. And it's much easier to see a reuse for this sort of thing.
Yeah, you took the other thing that was at the back of my mind, and I couldn't bring it forward because I recently purchased it's a 120 watt panel with a Bluetti battery, if that's how you pronounce it.
Right.
Partly because one of our camp guys has got one, and it was phenomenal for him last year. But I've got it as an emergency backup here at my home in Portland.
Right.
So it's I do disaster response as well. So it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I probably should pay attention to my own whatevers. And I can't remember what I paid for it. It came as a bundle and it was on offer. And I want to say the bundle, the two things together were under $400, which is a lot of money for some people. But I now know that I have power. In fact, I used it this week when they upgraded the electrical service to my house. I had power during the day because I could use that. So
Right.
Yeah, it's becoming more affordable, but those are definitely the things that I think as a community we need to share amongst the smaller camps especially, and then that will help bring it all down.
Even and one last thing I'll just show is this is an example of the really small scale, which is what I call a personal system. And it's just uses a USB battery that you probably already have. And you buy a small portable solar panel and one of these little USB meters so you can see how much you're actually charging. And you can buy adapters to plug into all sorts of things. I did this to plug into my Nikon camera battery charger. You can plug in LED lights, you can charge your phone, whatever. And this is super cheap, and it's the kind of thing that is really useful both on Playa as well as in your emergency personal home kit. So, we try to show that there can be every range of scale for these sorts of things. Guthrie has a question in the chat, and I think we're running out of time. What devices need to run a line from a Honda 1200 generator 12 volt output to a battery bank? I mean, it depends on what the battery bank is. If it has a lot of these, if it's a pre-made system, a lot of them have charging from basically you could plug into your cigarette lighter adapter. So depending on what the Honda 1200 has as an output, it may be just some sort of off-the-shelf cable adapter that you can plug in between the two. So without knowing the specifics of the two, it should be pretty straightforward if as long as the generator has a 12 volt DC output.
And if it doesn't, you can go a little low tech ish in that and get a good quality battery charger, not a trickle charger, but a real charger, and run that off the AC from the generator to the battery. Right? If you don't have sort of controllers and all that kind of stuff all nailed down, or a 12 volt direct output from the generator, you could go to AC and have it charge the battery.
And if you want, join us at one of our RAP meetings and we can talk through in more detail. Yep. If you go to Renewables for Artists team, there's a link to join. You don't have to actually join, but at the bottom there's a link to the Zoom meeting schedule, so you're free to join us. There, Buzz already put the RAP link in there. Perfect. He's ahead of me. Thank you, Buzz. Sven, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Just to come back to the topic we just had, I'm one of these European burners who try to figure out what to do with their solar panels. My solar panels just stay in my storage, which is really stupid if Burning Man tries to go carbon neutral, because they probably will not produce the energy it took to make these panels. So I think it would be good if we had a place to put solar panels during the year.
It's a great point. I mean, there had been some work with Burning Man, had this property called 360, and there was some efforts to, temporarily deploy systems there the rest of the year. I don't know what's happening with that lately. I know that kind of fell by the wayside. So, but I agree that, and actually that reminds me, there is some discussion about having a program where, many people come to us and say, we have spare panels we'd like to donate. And so there is a potential for a process this burn where there will be panels that artists that want to just basically either borrow them or get them for free and keep them. So because transporting solar panels is not a simple thing, especially a large number of panels. Not only does it take energy to do that, you need a vehicle to do that. You bring a whole bunch of them, they end up being pretty heavy. They can break, you get micro cracks or complete cracks. We've had them completely break. So it's not, that is a challenge too. So, and what do you do with them the rest of the year? So, I totally agree. That's a challenge. Let's see, I think we have a few more minutes left.
I could tell you what new I'm headed for.
Yep, please.
So in my quest for the coolest burn over the years, I tried little fans, and then I tried a swamp cooler and a different swamp cooler and a different swamp cooler, and was like, yeah, it was helpful and stuff. This year I'm actually going to try the new DC air conditioners. And so I'm going to replace the giant air conditioner that's up on top of my 1985 monstrosity of a Class CRV with one of these new 24 volt AC units. And we'll see how that does. But the amount of watts that it's going to take up is considerably less than the big AC unit that's up there right now.
What is the BTU rating of this unit?
10,000.
Oh, it's 10,000. That's
Yeah,
not
it's
insignificant.
10,000, and it's about 400 to 500 watts. So it's really not. It's rather miserly in the big scheme of things. But it has required me to convert my battery bank from 12 volts to 24 volts, which means getting a different inverter and some stuff and blah blah blah. But it means that the wires going to that unit won't be outrageously thick because they're half the amperage going to it that they would be if it was 12 volts, and it's more efficient to be a 24 volt conversion for that process as well. So I'm making that transition, adding a couple more panels to the RV, 200 more watts to supplement that, and we'll see how many hours we get of cool burn.
That's very interesting, because I think the 5,000 BTU window air conditioner that I used was about 350 to 400 watts. So if you can get 10,000 BTU out of that, that's a much more, the air conditioner I used was extremely cheap, so it wasn't a high efficiency unit.
And
but
you had
that's
to plug it into an inverter as well.
Pardon me?
You probably had to plug that into an inverter as well.
Right, that was plugged in the inverter that plugged into my Tesla battery, but I measured that 350, 400 watts of AC going into the air conditioner. So,
yeah.
But that's, half as efficient as what you're talking about. So that would be a big improvement.
Yep.
Is there enough time for me to quickly share my system with Miss Claire?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So just real quickly, this is a system I put together for my group. We're not a theme camp, but we are people who camp together. So our camp is about the size of 12. I did this with some input from Rat, but nevertheless was able to do it myself for the most part. And I shouldn't say for the most part, I did do it for myself, but just a couple of off-the-shelf batteries and the standard inverter Victron build, and that really, this combined with the panels, gave us power for the entire week. We had a great time with it, and there's people. Somebody brought a generator, we never bothered to turn it on. So this is as far as size between aeronautics and what Ken was showing. So if it's helpful in outreach or anything, this is up in the RAT website, the presentation I did on it, and we mix margaritas with it. So
The perfect test of a solar power system on Playa.
Nice packaging, by the way. That's really
really
cool.
nice.
You did that.
thank you.
Yeah, that's really nice. Yeah. I mean, that's the amazing thing is the DIY stuff like this is not nearly as complicated as it used to be. And then if you don't want to do DIY, there's so much off the shelf stuff that has just become commodity. It's funny how this has changed in the past 5 years. Just the battery prices themselves, the accessibility of the batteries, the accessibility of complete off the shelf systems. It's pretty remarkable how quickly this stuff has changed. I mean, recognizing also that there's people that can't afford this, but when it comes to even like I showed with, the personal solar power system, it's pretty inexpensive to at least be self-sustaining from basic lighting and communications capabilities. I think what we need to do is we need to do a map of solar powered cocktail offerings on Playa. I think that's what I think maybe that's an activity we need to work on.
It's funny over the
Definitely.
years. We've provided for our camp as a gift to the camp, frozen margaritas, blended margaritas every year, and I've been burning since 2012, and so that has morphed from being okay. It's time to fire up the generator and hope that it fires up because of dust and elevation.
Of course, right.
In 1985, did I mention? And so so that's evolved from that to we actually the last couple of years have done margaritas fully 100% on battery, and it's always been just like it feels so good.
Or ice cream or whatever. I mean, it's like that's the thing is that's right. It's and that's the amazing thing too is that this stuff that we need to we're trying with these kinds of sessions, but otherwise on Playa educational things. Is this stuff is possible. It's not as complicated. It's not as, I mean, even just like as Dr. Steve showed, just powering his deep freezer from a small solar system. It's much easier than it seems, and much less expensive than it would seem. So, and I know that there was another camp from Chicago that they have an entire moving van that they bring out, and they had a bunch of deep freezers, and they used one deep freezer actually to store their battery system because it was a great insulator. It was a really inexpensive, safe storage mechanism. And then the other part of it is they use them as refrigerators. You can put them on timers so they don't stay as cold as a freezer, but they actually much more efficient from a refrigeration standpoint because the cold air stays down. So even when you open it does all the air doesn't pour out. So that's that was a really efficient way I've seen a number of people doing that. And I think there's a way that you can, you basically put a timer on the unit so that it will, with a thermostat, with a thermometer inside, so that you can actually turn the controller so you can turn the freezer back on and off. I'm getting the hook. I see that we have only a couple of minutes left. Any last questions? Discussion points? I want to put in a plug for Marlena's video that she did. This thing, unfortunately, we tried playing it at the beginning. We can't seem to get the audio to play, but I highly encourage you. Bob, can you put or Marlena, can you put the URL? I don't have it handy at the moment. Can you put it in the chat? Oh, wait, I do have it. Hang on a second. It is awesome. Oh, there you go. Yeah. Go play. Go. We got to get we have to have the view count up on this one. This was Marlena did a video honoring the RAT mentors and who helped with artists on Playa, and it is hilarious. It's absolutely hilarious, and it's super creative. So It's one of the great uses of AI. Thank you, Marlena. Thank you for honoring all of us. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody's time today and your enthusiasm. Feel free to contact us at the Renewables for Artists team. We're, like I said, even though we're artists is our middle name, we're expanding to camps, and so we'll be glad to help everybody. And come join us either on Zoom or in person on Playa, or via the Green Theme Camp. Appreciate everybody being here today.